Government 2305, American Federal Government, Module 1.04, Limited Government. Americans distrust centralized leadership and seek to limit its power. 80 years before the Revolutionary War, Connecticut had grown used to electing its own leaders and going its own way. The people saw the king as a distant figure with no right to interfere in their affairs. The image of central government as a remote, untrustworthy authority that threatens our freedoms and runs through American history. So why did Americans develop this distrust? The answer lies in how the people secured their rights in the first place. In most nations, the central government, made up of kings or aristocrats or both, grudgingly granted their people rights such as the vote or jury trials. Sometimes the people rebelled, as in France. Sometimes they negotiated with kings, like in England. And sometimes monarchs expanded rights to modernize their nations, like in Thailand. All these countries share a common experience. Kings, or the central governments that replaced them, were the source of rights and liberties. No wonder citizens in these nations instinctively took to the government for help in solving their problems. The United States was different. Experience taught Americans to see the central government not as a potential source of rights, but as a potential threat to their life, liberty, and happiness. The paradox lies in the heart of the idea of limited government itself. People across the political spectrum demand government action, but towards conflicting ends. Conservatives want minimal taxes and minimal government services with maximum limits placed on the central government. Liberals want more government services, even if that means raising taxes on the wealthy in order to provide services to those who can't afford them. This leads us to a question that is even more contentious today than it was when America was just getting started. Why are we so divided? And why can't we all just get along? To at least gain a cursory understanding of these questions, we must begin with an explanation of what conservatives and liberals believe. Conservatives are usually seen as Americans who believe in reduced government spending, personal responsibility, traditional moral and religious values, and a strong national defense. Liberals are usually seen as Americans who value cultural diversity, governmental programs for the needy, public intervention in the economy, and individuals' right to lifestyle based on their own social and moral positions. The list of issues that divide liberals and conservatives is extensively long and incredibly complex. But one thing is for certain. You're not alone if you feel that the very foundations of our government are greatly threatened by the growing divide between the two camps. Much of our study of government will go back to this debate, and you will see the impact of these contentious political ideologies throughout the remainder of this course. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this course, it's not the ability to regurgitate facts and figures about our government. It's a better understanding of how and why we arrive at such a frustrating and confusing moment in our history, and what we as a nation can do to fix it, and so many other serious problems that face us today. Why are we seeing our nation torn apart, not from outside threats, but from our very selves? Is there any solution to the great differences in beliefs and ideologies that divide much of the nation today? Or are we destined to go the way of previous experiments in democracy that led to the Founding Fathers to institute safeguards and limits in order to address this very possibility? Americans often say that they don't like this idea of limited government and then demand government action for causes that they care about. Their calls for action generally face two hurdles: the desire to limit government and the Constitution. When the framers designed our political system, they organized suspicion of government right into the system. The federal Constitution includes an intricate system of checks and balances on power, as you saw in the previous videos. The Constitution limits what Congress may do, and Americans vigorously debate exactly where those boundaries are. Although it is difficult for government officials to undertake new tasks, the barriers are not insurmountable. During times of crisis, people turn to the government and demand action. Skilled leadership also can negotiate sweeping changes, and once programs go into effect, they often prove popular. James Madison once wrote in Federalist Paper number 51, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary." In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place oblige it to control itself. This famous quote explains the intent of the Founding Fathers in their insistence that organized barriers and limits be systemically included in the United States Constitution. The Constitution limits what Congress, the President, and the judiciary may do, but also grants each the powers over other branches. So let's quickly review. Americans distrust their government more than people in most other democracies traditionally have. The Constitution builds that distrust into our governing rules by providing for limited government. The result is a durable status quo. In many other countries, politicians can usually deliver the programs that they promised on their campaign trail. In the United States, winners confront multiple barriers to fulfilling their campaign promises. However, once programs do go into effect, they often prove popular and difficult to change.